Freedom. What is freedom? What does freedom look like? What does freedom smell like? What does freedom sound like? At some point in every man's life, the urge to ride becomes an overwhelming sensation. The siren song of the dirt bike becomes irresistible to the modern man, and when he hops back on the chopper, he realizes that which he already knew. He is untamable.
Excitebike was released on the NES as a launch title in 1985. It went on to become the 9th best-selling game on the system at 4.16 million units sold. It would go on to receive a direct sequel on the N64 called, you guessed it, Excitebike 64. Later, two spin-offs, Excite Truck and Excite Bots, would release on the Wii. Unfortunately, the latest game in the series, Excitebike World Rally, also released on the Wii back in 2009, was a digital-only release and is no longer available for purchase due to the Wii shop closure. All of that started here, and we're going to see if the original dream still holds up today. Excitebike is an extremely simple game. There are 3 game modes to choose from. Selection A is a time trial mode, Selection B is still a time trial mode, but now with rival racers racing with you. I say with you rather than against you, as you're still racing against the clock here. The other racers are simply obstacles that get in your way. It doesn't matter how many of them you passed, only your time matters. Lastly, there's a design mode which lets you build your own tracks. Selection A and B only have 5 courses, and they're the same 5 courses no matter what mode you're in. This surprised me right away, as that's not a lot of content at all. You can see all this game has to offer in about 30 minutes. However, 40 years later, I'm not sure that really matters. Most people who play this are probably playing it on the NES Classic or Switch Online, where it's bundled with a lot of other games, so the fact that it's short doesn't necessarily mean that we should count it out. The controls are also quite simple. You move forward using the A and B buttons. A has standard acceleration while the B button accelerates you faster, but you can't hold it too long, otherwise you will overheat the engine and be punished with having the bike stop and also deafness. The up and down buttons of the D-pad are used to switch lanes, but the thing that requires the most skill and the main mechanic of the game is using the left and right D-pad buttons to change your horizontal positioning of your bike. After jumping, you have to tilt the bike so that it's at the same angle of the ground you land on. If you do this perfectly, you won't lose any speed. If you're close, you'll lose some speed but keep going, and if you're way off, you'll crash and lose a few seconds getting back on your bike. There's a few obstacles to avoid like mud puddles, and there's also turbos on the ground that refill your cooldown meter. And that's pretty much it to this whole game, or at least Selection A. Selection B adds the other racers who I'm conflicted on. If you're actually playing this seriously and going for a low time record, these are incredibly annoying. If you crash into their back tire, you'll fall off your bike and lose a few seconds getting back on. Their patterns seem random and they can completely change lanes at any time, ruining your day. However, I like this mode because I usually spend most of my time doing it back to them. And I think that's where the real fun of this is, seeing how many you can knock over on a single run. For some reason, doing this is so satisfying. It makes for a chaotic mess. Lastly, there's your option to build a track. I'm guessing this is what most people spent the bulk of their time doing, as creating a track is very easy and quick to do. You can choose any element in the game and place it as you go. It's not the most in-depth level creator, but for the time, this had to be very neat. The Japanese version of the game could save tracks, but despite seemingly including the option to, you can't save your tracks in the US version. Well, not using the physical cartridge at least. Emulated versions like the NES Classic and Switch Online can overcome this limitation using save states, but it's still very weird they left these options in the US version at all back in the day. This had to confuse a lot of people, and I imagine many tears were shed after someone's masterpiece got wiped out. I messed around with this a little bit, but there wasn't much to it. And that's pretty much it. Is it worth playing today? It's a good game to just boot up when you're in between bigger games and just want to mess around for a bit, but it really hasn't stood the test of time as a game on its own right. The track editor is fine to mess around with a few times, but it's quite limited. Honestly, it's a shame this game never really got a proper sequel with these exact mechanics, as I think they're pretty fun. As I understand it, Excitebike 64 is more of a traditional racer, and a good one at that, but still quite different. I haven't played it to know for sure though. However, if you're dying to play a modern game that feels like it's building upon the groundwork laid here, I can definitely recommend the Trials series. This series doesn't have the multiple lanes, but it basically contains the exact kind of tilting mechanics pioneered in Excitebike. The one I'm playing here is Trials HD through backwards compatibility on my Series X. These games are fun and have plenty of content to keep you busy. And that's Excitebike. It's fun for what it is, but it's not a very deep experience. However, I'm happy it's here, and I kept wanting to play it even after I finished capturing footage, which is always a good sign. Next up, we have the last launch title on the NES Classic, Ice Climbers. Until then, have a great day.